If you've been invited to interview by one of your target MBA programs, you might be feeling a mix of excitement and yet some trepidation. You're one step closer to business school, but admissions interviews can be intimidating. In onTrack by mbaMission, our comprehensive asynchronous admissions course, we provide you with an entire module of 20 lessons on MBA interviews. Here's a sample lesson from the course in which I discuss how to prepare for resume-only or blind admissions interviews. Take a look. I've talked about the different types of interviews you might encounter, and now it's time to prepare. I'll start with the resume-only interview, but a word of caution first. Resist the temptation to just launch in and start practicing questions using our mock interview tool. At a certain point, repetition is not your friend. It dulls your responses, nor is trying to prepare for every possibility. Your goal is to be fresh and spontaneous rather than robotic. Let's discuss the steps to get you there. First, really take a step back and think about what you want to say about yourself. You should revisit your applications and especially your brainstorming outputs and consider every story you identified from as many angles as possible. The questions in resume-only interviews tend to be very, very flexible, which means you can spin answers to fit your best stories, to highlight your strengths. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say you get a question that's pretty broad in nature. For example, tell me about a time when you felt alive. You can answer, aka spin, that in many different ways. You could share a story about a hobby that you've been passionately committed to. Or you could share a story about a community endeavor that you supported that really took off. Or you could tell the story of when someone got your big idea at work. I could go on. Your stories are somewhat infinite. And because your interviewer will have seen only your resume, you don't need to worry about telling them a story they've already heard when reviewing your application. You can share anything. You have a blank slate. As you brainstorm, try not to take your own stories strictly at face value. If you had a big idea succeed at work, for example, maybe that's also the story about how you failed to persuade your supervisors initially, making it a good story for a question about failure too. Maybe that same story happens to be that of your greatest professional success or the story of how you've been a collaborative leader. Try to consider your experiences from every angle. Think about all the different stakeholders involved in each experience, so you have a full inventory of malleable stories that you can pull from to answer practically any question your interviewer poses. And actually, that ties into my second piece of advice. Go into your interview not just with your inventory of ideas, but also your hierarchy of them. Have your best stories top of mind and try to work as many of them into your responses as possible to the extent that you can. That said, don't tell the interviewer 5 different stories about your one big idea. You might have a reason to return to a story maybe once in an interview, but if you keep referring to the same experience, you risk coming across as a one-trick pony. You need to keep the interviewer engaged, keep them learning. With each question, do your best to transition to a new anecdote, a new skill, a new experience. You can tell 2 or 3 or even 4 stories from work as long as they're not about the same core experience or skill. But ideally, you should rotate from your community involvement to work, to your personal life, to work leadership, and back again. Again, ideally. If you keep your interviewer learning about you and showcase your experiences in a variety of settings, you'll both hold their attention and leave them with the impression that you have a strong internal motor that just keeps on humming. My third piece of advice shouldn't surprise you. Practice. I suggest that after you brainstorm and conduct an inventory of your stories and watch this interview module in full, you then practice with our interview tool to get comfortable with the questions you might encounter and to get a sense of how you use your time in responding. I recommend, and this is very general, that you respond to big opening prompts like, tell me about yourself in 3 to 4 minutes. You might answer questions about your career goals and about why you're targeting this specific program that you're interviewing with in 2 to 3 minutes. Same with any behavioral prompts. Again, though, you might go longer or shorter depending on the situation and depending on the possibility of maybe your interviewer interjecting with a follow-up question or trying to learn more. Don't worry, I'll discuss how to respond to these prompts in the coming lessons. That leaves us with 2 very important and related final points about what not to do. Do not write your answers down and try to memorize them. Do not over-rehearse to the point of memorization. Put yourself in the shoes of an interviewer. How would you feel if you asked an applicant a question and got robo-responses back, or if you got answers that just lacked passion and conviction? It would be off-putting. Your interviewer's goal is to get to know you. They want to know that you're there in the moment with them, sharing your best. When someone is simply reciting prepackaged answers, it's really obvious a good 99% of the time, and it leaves the interviewer feeling frustrated. They're just not getting what they're there for, which is you. So please use the videos in this module to get comfortable with the admissions interview and work to be as in the moment as you possibly can, even though the situation is understandably anxiety-provoking. We want to assure you that every applicant feels a little nervous. Every applicant feels that way. The solution is just opening yourself to the experience. This is just one of the lessons from our in-depth interview module in onTrack. In the rest of this module, I walk you through all of the different types of MBA interviews, discuss strategies for how to organize your answers, and deep dive into some of the most commonly asked questions. In onTrack, we even provide you with a mock interview tool allowing you to practice with customized questions for each of your target programs. Interviews are, of course, just one piece of the application puzzle. Our onTrack curriculum covers everything from school selection to brainstorming to managing your recommenders and so much more. It all starts with your customized learning path. If you're ready to learn more, tap the link to take our introductory questionnaire and receive your personalized plan. We'll see you in onTrack.